Good afternoon, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. I'm a meteorologist in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope you all are having a great weekend. Well, we are getting rid of Debbie, but another threat emerges across the Atlantic, and the next name on the list is Ernesto. We do have now Invest 98L with a high risk of becoming our next named storm as we get into next week. And it actually looks like it's starting to develop a little bit more than maybe anticipated, at least over the last 12 to 24 hours. We'll see if that trend continues. But regardless, I would be preparing for this system to overachieve as it moves into record warm waters, approaching the Leeward Islands and then heading maybe towards Puerto Rico as we get towards next Tuesday into Wednesday. Now, there's a chance this system could still form farther north or south. But the average of the models takes it towards Puerto Rico, maybe Hispaniola as well. And then after that, generally speaking, it will make a right turn. But the big question mark is that a guarantee yet? And this system hasn't formed, so I really don't want to write off all possibilities at this point. So I would definitely watch it on the East Coast, watch it in Bermuda, watch it across all the Caribbean and the Bahamas. Less likely that the Gulf has to stress about it, but I've seen crazy things happen in my many years doing this. So at this point, though, more than likely, it's either going to be a fish storm or potentially a real threat for the East Coast. And it will be some time before we can decide that for certain. Here is the Invest at this point, 30% chance of developing in the next couple of days and 80% in 7 days. It does not have a low-level center just yet, a very broad area, but it is a growing area. And you can see here, let me move this along to about this afternoon here. You can see that there is some dust certainly still in place here, which has hampered development, but is primarily off to the north and east of the center. As it moves in this general direction closer to the islands, we are in a more favorable position for this system to develop. So it may take a couple more days, but I do think by the time we look at Monday and maybe Monday night, we are likely going to have something that is getting close to the Lesser Antilles. So certainly something we need to watch here. This system likely to track north of where Beryl tracked here about a month or so ago, end of June, but the water temperatures in this area have certainly not cooled off. If anything, they've warmed up, and I will show that to you here. I do want to show you the rest of the tropics before we focus in on this. The remains of Debbie, not Beryl, Debbie have merged with a front and racing off across eastern Canada. Montreal had its wettest day on record yesterday. Pretty crazy. The Pacific is not super quiet, but we do have a remnant low. And then we've got another area that has a slight chance of developing near the Mexican Riviera. And in the Western Pacific, we still have Tropical Storm Maria, which may re-strengthen a little bit more, fighting some wind shear, but likely to move into northern Japan here in the next 24 hours as a weakening tropical storm. So if you have folks out there, make sure to check in with them as this system moves through, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a major storm. So anyway, let's talk Atlantic. Let's talk the Invest 98L. Invest, by the way, means that models are going to be run on an area of interest or an area of investigation. Once it is determined that it is a tropical system, it will get the tropical depression and then tropical storm monikers. But right now, just an Invest, just an area of interest. And you can see a 30% chance over the next 48 hours that this could become a depression or storm. And then over the next 7 days, a high likelihood this will be a system that will be affecting portions of the Lesser Antilles. We may see potential tropical cyclone advisories initiated sometime late in the weekend, as this system would be moving towards the islands by Monday night and Tuesday morning. We may have tropical storm watches and warnings eventually posted, but until it forms, there is some uncertainty on that. I will say this, I think the chance is going to be higher than 30% that this becomes something between now and Monday afternoon, the next 48 hours. I would personally increase that chance to 40 to 50%. Based on what I'm seeing. But as you can see across the Atlantic, that is the area of greatest concern right here, halfway between Africa and the Lesser Antilles. There's another wave to keep an eye on at this point. And most models don't really develop that into much. It's really this lead system that we have to be concerned with heading in this direction and then making a turn more towards the north, potentially here as we get later into next week. It's at least a week away from any potential impacts on the southeastern U.S. coast. So we've got a lot of time for this to change. That is, of course, assuming that it keeps its current track. If you look at the water vapor image, some important features to point out here. One, we do have this upper level trough in here backing away to the west. That is breaking up the ridge a little bit and will allow this system to gain some latitude. So unlike Barrel, with the ridge building in, we've got this trough, which is going to be in the way, and that's going to keep it on a little bit more of a northerly track than what we saw with Barrel. So unlikely Barbados and St. Lucia on south see any kind of direct impact from this. They'll get some rain, they'll get some wind, but most likely this system is going to be turning more to the west-northwest. Now, depending on how this feature up here interacts with our system, could make all the difference between the system going into the Caribbean and threatening Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, or even trying to just clip through the northern portions of the Leeward and Virgin Islands and actually missing Puerto Rico. That is certainly still a possibility. Until it forms, all of these potentials are on the table. As we look at the system here, you can see it does not have a low-level center just yet. But you can see some banding features taking shape here, meaning this system, once it does form a central core, has a very good chance of growing in size and becoming a formidable storm, and likely a hurricane down the road here by next Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So right now you can see there's some shear that's impacting the system, and it's fighting the outflow here on the northern side. Very good outflow and inflow on the southern side, but on the northern part of this system, we are going to continue to struggle to develop. But once these start coming together here in the next couple of days, I do expect we will see a core forming. Here's a look at the rest of the Atlantic, and you can see our next wave right now heading into a more hostile environment until this first feature moves away. But it is a large system and something that I do think we do need to keep an eye on down the road here, maybe in about a week. Let's look at the upper level pattern and where this feature may go, and you can see large area of high pressure in place between the Azores and Bermuda. This would be our system here Monday afternoon, and you can see starting to grow a bit of a center. We do have a bigger trough moving into the eastern United States, and what that's going to do is provide a weakness in the ridge and allow the system the opportunity to begin to gain some latitude somewhere up in here. I'm going to move this along, and then I'm going to get these off the map so you can kind of see where this is headed here. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and you can see this trough is actually digging southeast. Let me pull my pen back out and show you, just so you can see. This trough is actually digging south and east, and if it gets far enough south, it is going to eventually curve the system more north. Bermuda is right here. The southeast coast is right here, and this weakness provides it an avenue to turn away near the Turks and Caicos and just east of the Bahamas and gain some latitude. What I'm concerned about, though, as we move on further in time, and again, it's still pretty uncertain right now, is that this trough lifts away and high pressure begins to build in over the top of it. You see this area of high pressure in here? It is beginning to expand back in this direction. And as a result, if this model is correct, then future Ernesto is not going to go into the ridge. It's going to try to find a way back to get attracted to this trough here on the east coast. What does that mean? Well, our system may clip New England, it may bend back into the northeast, or it may flirt with the east coast, and then eventually, as this trough picks it up and breaks up our ridge, eventually it could recurve. But it's not necessarily doing it near Bermuda. It may be doing it much farther to the north. So that is something that we definitely need to watch here as we get to this time next weekend. This is 8 to 9 days away, so I guarantee it's probably going to look a lot different. However, this is one such piece of the puzzle that we do need to monitor here. What would cause this ridge to be so strong? We'll take a look here at the sea surface temperature anomalies from yesterday. This is from the University of Miami, Brian McNulty, and you can see here water temperatures east of Nova Scotia and across the North Atlantic are not just 4 degrees Celsius above average, but let's try 5 or 6. That's over 10 degrees Fahrenheit above what you would expect this time of the year. And this is about the warmest time of the year, almost the warmest time of the year in the North Atlantic. Now, when you've got temperatures like that, the high pressure systems are going to be stronger. It's more buildup of latent heat. So the stronger a high pressure system would be, the more a trough that moves off the east coast would find a way to either cut off or eventually get kicked away to the north and east. Those are not exactly great if you're rooting for this system to move out to sea right away, not with this kind of gradient, but things can change, certainly. If you look at the ocean heat content, you see, of course, we are loaded up here for pretty quick development. If anything does head into the Leeward Islands and eventually towards Puerto Rico, the hottest waters and the deepest of the heat are in the northwestern Caribbean, but we haven't had anything really get up into there without some kind of a a condition that's caused problems. With Debbie, last week, we were just dealing with land the whole time, so we never really got into the richest waters. With Beryl a month ago, or I guess 6 weeks ago, we had an upper low and wind shear on top of it. So while there was potential, the system did weaken due to that wind shear from that trough. And here's a closer look so you guys can see. We definitely are going to see the system head into an area of favorable intensification based on ocean heat content alone. And if anything, the models may end up under predicting how this system could intensify. And if you look at the visible, you can see why. Very favorable space for this system to grow, but it does still have some time before that can happen. Now, taking a look at the future of the system, I think it's pretty much a done deal that we have at least a depression moving into the islands here. This time frame is Tuesday evening around 8 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time. And you can see some ensembles bring it through near Guadeloupe or just north, maybe towards Antigua and Barbuda, and then perhaps taking aim at Puerto Rico. There are some, though, that keep it more on a northerly track and actually avoid a direct hit, coming within 100 miles of the islands, but staying just to the north. Over time, you will see that it will begin to gain latitude on more than 3/4 of our model members. And you can see these colors indicating a stronger system, at least a tropical storm, but potentially even a hurricane at this point. After that, things diverge significantly, and depending on where our trough ends up, how this interacts with Hispaniola, we still have some solutions that are making those of us in Florida and the Bahamas and Cuba uncomfortable. So we cannot completely rule this out just yet, even though a bigger majority of our models do show this system beginning a recurve at this point. Bermuda's right here, and that's certainly in the crosshairs. But again, we have just much less of a turn and certainly something we need to watch on the southeast coast. This is a week from today, 192 hours into this forecast, and the spread just extreme at this point. A few models out in here, more models that are actually out in here, and even a few that go by to the east of Bermuda at this point. Bermuda's right here. And I'm sorry if my colors are clashing, but we have every color on the map represented today. We're nice and diverse. So yes. So let's take a look at what our tropical models are now showing. And you will see more than half bringing the system towards Guadeloupe and maybe even towards Montserrat and Antigua and Barbuda. I apologize if I'm saying these names wrong. I know there's different pronunciations. The farthest south does take us very close to Dominica and then makes a direct hit on Puerto Rico on the eastern side. The majority of the guidance a little farther to the right of Puerto Rico, moving through the Virgin Islands. And we do have a few potential outliers here that are bringing the system even farther north a little bit more. What we've seen with storms that have originated out in here that models have had to correct to the left a lot more. They've under-predicted the strength of the Bermuda high-pressure system. So if something adjusts at this point, I think it's a lot more likely to be to the left than it is to the right. We'll have to see, of course, but that right now is kind of my initial thoughts. The ensembles from the GFS from earlier today, the mean is, you can see there's a ton of spread here, over 1,000 miles between off the Florida coast and moving away east of Bermuda, with the average between Bermuda and the Outer Banks. So definitely more uncertainty than we could even try to predict at this point. So for folks that are saying guaranteed out to sea, that's not necessarily true, but certainly there's more model support for that. Now, intensity forecasts are all over the place, and until the system does generate into a tropical depression, these are going to remain very all over the place. But you can see they're all showing intensification once we get into next Monday night, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And after things clear the greater Antilles and maybe move closer to the Turks and Caicos and just east, there will be some very warm water in the way for maybe some faster intensification. So let's take a look at some tropical models. This is the HMON, and you can see it is showing strengthening here and then actually clipping just to the north and east of Antigua here and staying just away from the Caribbean. This would happen as if the storm develops faster than all the other models are showing. It would have a chance to gain more latitude, and this would be what we would be rooting for because it would not be a threat to land, but it would be a powerful storm. This is a Category 4 hurricane showing up by next Thursday, but nowhere near land at this point. Here's the HWRF tropical model, and you can see it's a little bit more conservative on development, but does show it strengthening here into a stronger tropical storm Tuesday night, and then approaching Puerto Rico as a strengthening hurricane. That pressure of 979 winds about 80 to 85 miles per hour, making landfall on the southeastern coast here. Now, again, that's not a guarantee, but that's what this model is showing. And you can see the strengthening trend continues. It treats Puerto Rico like a small speed bump and just continues to strengthen, moving just east of the Turks and Caicos on Thursday morning. I would show you the HAFS models, but they are not designed for use before tropical genesis. They are going to be a lot wilder and probably underdone on things at times. So certainly something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Let's look at the global models real fast. Here's the European model showing development here on Tuesday morning and a track over the Virgin Islands here Tuesday night, crossing Puerto Rico and then becoming a stronger system on Wednesday after leaving Puerto Rico. That would be a better case scenario for Puerto Rico in that it wouldn't be as strong, but you can see it is strengthening the system. Now, take a look here as we zoom in to the northwestern portion here of the Atlantic. And this is weatherbell.com. And sorry, it skipped a model ahead. That model only runs up to a few days. But you can see here, Bermuda on the southern part here. We do have a strengthening storm taking shape here, approaching Bermuda in about a week. This would be Saturday night. But take a look at the last couple of frames here. We see the system, which looks like it's going to head away to the northeast, begin to gain some longitude back to the west, which would make those of us here in New England certainly more uncomfortable. It eventually does turn it back away, moving it towards Nova Scotia here, towards next Tuesday and Tuesday night. But we have seen some fluctuation here. There's a lot of uncertainty once we get farther off into time. But it's not necessarily just taking it away. It is actually wobbling it around here and interacting with this upcoming trough. So that could certainly mean some mischief on the East Coast. Here is the control run, very similar to the operational. But you can see here again, take a look at this. Our system, which looks like it would head towards Bermuda, starts to make more of a westerly bend, temporarily at least, as we get towards next weekend. So after that, it does eventually recurve it away. But again, we are getting uncomfortably close here to New England and Atlantic Canada. And then the GFS model, which yesterday took it right into North Carolina, fortunately has backed off on that. But interestingly, the GFS keeps it south of Puerto Rico and slams into Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic here as a hurricane Wednesday night, and then right over the Turks and Caicos on Thursday night, and eventually recurving and getting closer to Bermuda on the west next Saturday and Sunday, and then making a direct hit on Nova Scotia here. So as you can see, all of the global models at this point say it could threaten Atlantic Canada and New England. Nothing just takes it way out to sea, and then that's that. This area of high pressure could be a little bit too dominant for something like that to happen. So we definitely have to watch that. Here's a look at GFS predicted winds. And taking the strongest winds here, 60-mile-per-hour gusts right over Guadeloupe. And as we head into Wednesday, this would be better for Puerto Rico as it would stay south, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. A lot of models are farther north, but you can see it takes aim here at portions of the Dominican Republic going right over the island. Here's a look at the Greater Antilles, and you can see those winds piling up here Wednesday night over Dominican Republic and then approaching Turks and Caicos Islands here Thursday night. And then the system, as it pulls away, begins strengthening, as you might expect in the warm waters of the southwestern Atlantic. Here's a look at potential rainfall. We will have some heavy rain over the Windward Islands through the weekend. That is not necessarily associated directly with our system, but then the heavier rains move through here on Tuesday, potentially 3 to 6 inches across the southern Leeward Islands. Perhaps Puerto Rico sees a lot of this rain, and the Virgin Islands do as well, but higher amounts are projected here over Hispaniola and over portions of the Turks and Caicos. In fact, this particular run of the model is showing up to 440 millimeters of rain. That's 17 inches of rain right over the mountains here of the Dominican Republic. So that could be very bad. Again, main points at this point, we're still uncertain. We've got to wait till the system forms, but it is showing us signals that it will become a hurricane. It could overachieve, especially early on in the life of the system. And we just can't rule anybody out. I think the Gulf is probably okay, but keep an eye on it in Florida, and certainly keep an eye from North Carolina on up into the Maritimes and in Bermuda as well. I appreciate y'all's time today. I'm going to try to get a video out tomorrow, but I do have a lot going on. It might be later in the afternoon, but as always, I'm going to do my best to get you a daily video. I thank you for joining me. I thank you for your support, and I ask that you haven't yet. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to this channel and sharing with your friends as well. Just know that I'm a Christian, and I give all the honor and glory to God and Jesus Christ, my Savior, who just has meant the world to me. And even though we talk about these natural disasters, like we can just stop what they're doing and pray to God and then things are going to go away, it just doesn't work that way. The laws of nature just don't allow for the beatings to not continue. And it's sad, but just know that there's a lot of power in prayer. There's a lot that can be said about turning to God in times of trouble. One such verse I like to refer to all the time is Psalm 46, 1 and 2. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth be removed and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. And the takeaway here is that God is here to be the ultimate healer, to be our refuge, to fight our battles for us so that we don't have to fight them alone. We all are facing battles. We all run into fear. We all sin. Nobody's better than anybody else at this point. I think God's no respecter of persons. Just know, though, he wants us to turn to him to help us in the troubles that we face. And I'm very much a believer in the power of prayer. And if you are fighting some demons right now, if you are going through difficulties, please allow me to encourage you through a word of prayer. Feel free to list any of those prayer requests, and we'll turn it all over to God here and let him do his work. He can work magic. He's worked miracles. He's given us Jesus to die on the cross and then to be resurrected so that we can live eternally with him in heaven. So I hope you all are safe out there and have a great weekend. And as always, I'll catch you soon. Take care.